Hi everyone, Simon Foster here from Screen Watching. In the new Australian film Before Dawn, we follow a group of young men who take up arms in what should have been the war to end all wars, but wasn't. It is a powerful story that celebrates mateship and courage, while also lamenting the sad waste of life, which is what all wars ever come to represent. The director of Before Dawn is Jordon Prince-Wright, who joins us now to talk about this very moving film. Mate, thank you for joining us on Screen Watching.
No worries. Thanks for your time.
Mate, I want to jump right to the end of the film to start with. It finishes on a dedication to Grandad. How personal is this film for you? Was your grandfather a serviceman, or does that, as I read it, also acknowledge everyone's granddad who's been in this situation?
Well, it definitely does acknowledge everyone. To give you an idea on a personal level, so it's both military. So Grandad served with the UK, so he came from the UK, etc. But yes, he's got military background. But the reason why I've dedicated this to him is not actually the military aspect. It's the fact that Grandad has always told me to go out there, and if something's impossible to do, go out there and do it. And he's always supported my dreams and always supported me in everything that I've done. And so for me, it was a no-brainer. I had to dedicate this to him because this film was impossible on many aspects and many levels, which I'm sure we'll get into soon. But he's always said to me, like, if you're really passionate about telling a story, go and do it. And I used to sit and watch war movies with Grandad, and then he used to tell me stories, of his military background. And so there's many levels there. And for me, it was a no-brainer. I had to dedicate it to Grandad. But for instance, Jordan he had all of his granddad's war medals at the premiere.
Oh, wow.
Some of the other actors had it as well. And so, yes, it's dedicated to my granddad, but you're exactly right. You pretty much took the words out of my mouth. It's dedicated to everybody, everyone's granddad, everyone's great granddad, because it's because of their sacrifice, and even grandmothers, as the nurses,
Sure.
etc., the women at home during World War II, etc., etc. It's because of them that we get to live in an amazing world that we live in today. At a click of a button, we can have whatever we want.
Yep.
So yeah, that is in a nutshell why I've dedicated it to Granddad and to everybody else's grandparents.
You mentioned one of your cast members there, Jordan Deleu, and the cast. It feels like a real peek into the next generation of big Aussie stars, not just Levi and Ed, who obviously they've got runs on the board, but also Travis Jeffrey, who's terrific, and Stephen Peacock and Oscar. What qualities made this ensemble your version of the Great Generation? When they all got together, what was it about them that made them your battalion?
Look, they were all down to earth. A lot of it was just calling the agents and going, I want this particular actor. I know I want to work with them, and I'm not going to take no for an answer. And I'm so glad that I did that. And we filmed in the wettest winter on record.
Wow.
The sets, you would have seen the scale of the sets, the
Yeah.
mud. It was so harsh. What we did was we pretty much, and as a director, I'm a strong believer that if I cast everyone correctly, 50% of my job's done. And I'm a strong believer in that that's what I wanted to do. And then what I did is I went, right, now I've got an amazing cast. Here is hell. I'm going to put you in hell. The closest thing that I can to the Western Front, I'm going to put you in there.
Yeah.
And that first week, they realized how hard the shoot was going to be. Even the crew, we then realized. And the worse it got, the funnier things got. An actor would walk along, would all of a sudden the mud that was, a few nights before, the mud was only ankle deep. But then we've had a crap load of rain the night before, so now it's knee deep. And you walk along, next minute you sink into the mud.
Oh, yeah.
And everyone would have a joke at that, or next minute, Tim's running around going, I've lost my boots and my putties in the mud, costume, I need some more boots,
Which you feature in the film. I mean,
yes,
it's one of Jim's first experiences when he hits the trenches. The boot goes
exactly.
deep up to his ankle.
Yeah, and it is actually the small moments in the film that it's those constant small moments that keep building on the harshness and the exhaustion.
Yeah.
And it's those small moments that you see that were also happening to us, also happening to the cast and crew, that were just exhausting us. To move the camera on this set would take 30 to 40 minutes just to move it from one location to another.
Well, it raises an interesting.
Yeah,
It raises an interesting point. as a young director, you could have gone off and shot a little horror film that takes place in 2 rooms in a house and traveled the world with it. Instead, you decided to recreate the Western Front and make this enormous period piece. And I mean, I know it wasn't a huge budgeted production, but it has a scope and a vastness to it, which certainly is conveyed on the cinema screen. So it should be seen on as big a screen as possible. What was the experience like? Was it in the can and you were back home on the couch exactly as you planned?
No. Look, I wish, but no. Look, I'm taking a step back. I did the Western movie, and that was like, oh, this is going to be impossible. We're filming a film in the middle of nowhere, limited budget, etc. But hey, look, we did it. And then I was like, right, what's the next impossible thing? Well, these diaries, I read these diaries back in high school, and I've always wanted to make it. And so every short film, finding a team to work on the feature, the Western was to go, all right, we can actually make a film here with unconventional way of funding, with the sponsorship and private investment and having the shires funded, etc. So using that way of thinking, that outside of the box thinking, which in a way is kind of past the way for other filmmakers doing similar things now. And let's do it again, but on Before Dawn, let's just do it on steroids. And the fact that we had gone through all of this, we'd learned so much on the short films, the features. There's no way I'd make Before Dawn as my first feature. I'd be an idiot if I did that, because the story, I have to do the story justice. So I was constantly learning, and all the way along going, okay, when I'm doing that film Before Dawn 2 years from now, what we're doing now, I've just learned this, so we won't do it on that, vice versa, And so when we got to Before Dawn, the scale of it, we were just on a train that just kept moving and moving, right? We've done the Western, let's do the World War I film. When COVID hit and I had to postpone for 12 months, it drove me up the wall because I just want to keep going with the project. But what we did is we flipped it and we went, okay, we got 12 months here. And for those that know me will say, actually, this is incredibly dangerous, because Jordon has now got 12 months to make this even bigger again.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what we did. We decided, okay, now we've gone from 10 tons of wood to 30 tons of wood. It just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And and for me, I've been told I've been born in the wrong era, because I grew up watching Al Brenner, Steve McQueen, John Wayne. I loved all those films, the golden era, even as far back as that.
Sure.
And they did stuff for real. There was no CGI. And you can go and watch The Magnificent Seven with the Al Brenner. And while sometimes the acting might be a bit iffy, you can still sit there and watch it, because it's not like, oh, the CGI is outdated because 2 years later it's outdated.
Yeah.
And so even with this, the drone shot, for instance, there's parts of it that you go, oh, that's CGI. It's actually not. It's just the way that the wind was moving.
Yeah.
It's really bizarre. And that's why I was like, no, we have to do this for real. And the other level of that is, if I do it for real, the audiences are going to feel like they're actually there. They're going to feel the mud on them. They're going to feel the exhaustion when that explosion that goes off on the Hindenburg line. I mean, at the premiere, we had people jumping in the cinema that I was in anyway. People all jumped.
Right.
That's
a good feeling.
Great.
That's got to be a good feeling.
Scared? Good.
Yes,
exactly.
I want to focus in on Jim, your lead character, is played by the wonderful Levi Miller. He's a great young actor. He reminded me a little bit of Jim Caviezel's character in Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line. He's not a natural born killer. He's not a soldier seeking this sort of blood and guts glory. He's almost someone with a bit of a savior complex in a place where that'll get you killed. He's a very unusual lead character for a war film. What perspective can you put on that?
So I'm going to jump back again to what I grew up watching, and I've always loved, I mean, a lot of the war films today, it's like the lead actor that, he goes out and he wants to shoot and all this. But what I wanted to do is go, well, I actually grew up with watching, and one of my favorite films is Kelly's Heroes, the ensemble cast of Kelly's Heroes, and taking that ensemble cast, but then also putting it into a modern day storytelling of war movies, putting that together. And when you read the diaries, it wasn't like that there was just this hero that went out and it wasn't just to shoot him up. It was, this is actually how it was. So why are we going to I remember discussing this initially with some of the studios and the executives and all that were coming on board, and they were pushing for, well, we want to make Levi's character, Jim, we want to make him more heroic. We want him, when he goes over the top to save someone, he needs to, you know, shoot some of the enemy, and it's like, you know, build music and make it heroic. I'm like, yeah, but that's not what it was actually like. It wasn't like that. And what we're doing here is or what I want to do is actually show audiences what it was like.
Yeah.
And so then you've got, and there were, you know, the grudge between Nichols and Jim. There was actually a grudge, and you go, well, you know, but then 2 seconds later, they're mates, but then there's still a grudge.
Sure.
And it's like, that's exactly how it was in the diary. So I didn't want to, yes, don't get me wrong, it's entertainment. So we have to adjust things and make extra conflict and that sort of thing to take people on this journey. But I also wanted it to be constantly an event after an event after an event, and make sure that it felt real on screen. So when people walked out of there, they had gone on that emotional journey. They felt like they were there. And at the premiere that we had, which was Australia's largest premiere ever, which was madness, 1,500 plus people.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was nuts. People were coming up, and people were coming up to me with photos and whatnot. And some were shaking my hand and they were smiling. Others were coming up, bawling their eyes out in tears. And I'm like, okay, so that's, in other words, what we've done here, and I say we, cast and crew, is that we have achieved what I hope to have achieved, which is not just, oh yeah, this is just a war movie.
Well,
this is just another go in, battle, save the day.
That takes me to my next point, because it's treading some very hallowed ground in terms of cinema history. That fate of idealistic young men going to war, it conjures films like, obviously, All Quiet on the Western Front and Kubrick's Paths of Glory, and perhaps the greatest Australian film ever, in Gallipoli. What is how much inspiration did you draw from this great traditional history of film? And what's the point of difference that Before Dawn offers to something like that?
Look, for me is, I mean, look, Gallipoli, I remember watching that in high school, and I remember like the end scene of Gallipoli and like the breath being taken out, you know, and going, you know, whoa, you know, I felt like I'd been shot in the guts myself, like, you know, this is nuts. And so having those moments in film is very rare. And that's one thing with Before Dawn, is I wanted to make sure that we had those moments, those sudden, like, oh, we didn't expect that, you know, and oh, hang on, he's a known actor, but he's now been wounded, or vice versa, without giving too many spoilers away. But
yeah, of course, yeah.
It was having those moments that audiences sit there and go, well, when we're no longer looking at the fact that this is an actor, we're now looking at that this is just a boy, or just a guy, or just a female that's as a nurse, and just the rawness. I believe that what we've done with Before Dawn is we've portrayed a rawness of war that is just straight to the point, and allows people as audiences to sit there and have those moments where they have got the wind that's been taken out of them, and almost invokes them to think more than just walk out of that cinema and go, oh yeah, that was a bit of entertainment.
Sure.
It's not, it's yes, it's entertainment, but we're also, what I want to do with this is have an awareness that what the Anzacs did. And so that's what I hope that that's what we've achieved anyhow.
It doesn't feel like you cut any corners regarding authenticity. The struggle of these young men, the experience of the European front line, it seems to have been conveyed very consistently. And what I want to ask is, when you're doing the research, and there's clearly a great deal of research having been done to create this authenticity, does that influence how the story goes at any point, or are you solely at the mercy of the script that you've written and sticking very much on course? Because as you discover things that may not have played out in real life, and it sounds like you have a lot of integrity about wanting to tell this as a truthful story.
Yeah, look, definitely. Those that know me, I'm very collaborative. Even with the actors, you know, sometimes they will have moments. I said, look, if you find a moment there in the background and you want to have a joke, or you think your character at this point was breaking down, etc., go for it. But also, if it's going to be something quite extensive, let's go back to the original material, the diaries as well, and just kind of look at that and compare it and make sure we're still on point with them. But the thing with this is that we built the trenches to scale. You know, we did it off the trench maps. So immediately we already had a canvas there to work off. We had we had all the sets that were real. So when you turn that corner and there was a machine gun pit there, that's where the machine gun pit was. When you turn the next corner and there was like a part that you had to crawl over, that's exactly how it was on those maps.
Yeah.
So we were already halfway there with the authenticity because the set was built according to the scale and the look, etc. And then, you know, hats off to the team with like costuming. You know, that was, the actors hated it. And let's put it this way, they hated it at start because we wanted it to be so authentic that the uniforms, they weren't like uniforms that were made for film. So what I mean by that is there's a warehouse in Queensland that we went to where when there's a lot of like deceased estates, for instance, and people will find uniforms, they get sent to museums. Museums don't have the space. They then go to this place in Queensland.
Right.
So we had that many uniforms from there, but they were the original uniforms, which means the actors were itchy all day. They were like
thick
putting
wool,
moisturizer.
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
yeah. And it was like, and that's why sometimes when you see them, they're shaking. They're not putting it on, they're shaking because the wool is holding the water in and they're freezing. And we had space blankets to help them out, that sort of thing. And there were times where, you know, hats off again to a lot of them. They're like, no, we don't want the space blankets in this scene. My safety officer's brain was going like
I was about to say, is any of this sort of
but-
encroaching on OH&S territory or what?
Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. You know, we're all kind of like, it was, but you walked it like they weren't stupid about it, but there were times where the actors are going, no, this is the scene.
Yeah.
We've got an hour that we're shooting this. We want it to be real because we want the audience to experience it. And look, the guys did an incredible job. But yeah, the wool and whatnot, like that was itchy. And so they were like putting moisturizer on. And some of the extras were funny. They were putting Coles shopping bags in their shoes. So that way their boots wouldn't get wet. And yeah, it was
just like it was back then. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And with typical East Coast prejudice, I'm going to ask this question, but WA as a production base, I'm thinking ahead to your career. WA as a production base, it looked like it provided everything it needed to provide to make a cracking film.
Yeah, look, it provided everything for the Western. It provided everything that I needed. We built sets down south, wettest winter on record. It had all the right soil type. And then up north, we had the sheep stations. And look, we had support from across Australia, you know, and a lot of people will say, oh, you know, you're West Australian, you filmed WA. Well, I just happened to film here because we had the locations. The next film I'm doing is on another epic scale. And I hope to do that across, well, we have to, because it's a true story in various states. But like, I'm Australian, I love Australian stories, and this is an Australian story. Yes, it was filmed in WA, but it goes to, it's Anzacs, it's for all of Aussies, it's all of New Zealand. And, you know, the next movie itself, I'll get support again, I hope, from all across Australia, and we'll be filming everywhere. But look, WA definitely helped. It definitely did everything I needed to with the locations. Everybody here is amazing to work with. It's great. We did have a lot of servicemen and crew from over east that flew in, but that's not to say that I'm going to stay in WA. There's definitely other states that I want to film in because, yes, WA's got remarkable landscapes, but our entire country does. Like,
it's true.
Fortunate enough to travel. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to travel around with the Western when that released, and I'm going to be hopefully fortunate enough with Before Dawn to travel around. And every time I travel around, I'm constantly going, yep, that'll work for that film. Yep, that location will work for this one. You know, I'm
never not
so
directing. Never not directing. Good for you.
Exactly.
Jordon Prince-Wright, thank you so much for joining us on Screen Watching, and thank you for Before Dawn. You've made a terrific film that, as well as being a terrific and very moving bit of entertainment, but certainly honours the generations that have gone before that have made the ultimate sacrifice. So thank you, mate, and good luck with everything down the track.
No worries. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.